we just talk about violent crime? What has violent crime done here in Oklahoma City over the past few years? Has it gone up?
Well, I mean, the last several years, it's inched up some because we had a huge drop between 2012 and about 2015, 16. But the last couple of years it's inched up, but not dramatically.
So what do you attribute it when I guess you said in 2012 it went down?
Mm-hmm.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, a lot of it we contribute it to being able to put more officers in those high violent crime areas because the council added a lot of positions, but you can't fill those positions immediately. So we had the funding in our budget, so we were able to use some of it for overtime programs to saturate some areas where we had a lot of violent crime.
You can't do that now.
It's right. We can't do that now.
The numbers. Is it 129 new officers if this penny sales tax gets voted through?
Right. They're going to what the council has said, or what I've heard the proposal is going to be, because it hasn't been finalized or voted on yet. But the proposal that I understand it to be is to put to the 48 officers that are currently frozen and have been for the last two budgets will be put back in. So we'll have those 48 positions. And then there's another, I believe, 86 or so positions that they would add with additional sales tax.
Where do you think we need to be here in Oklahoma City, the department, numbers-wise?
Well, I'm going to stick to the staffing study that we presented to the council back in 2010. Because we had an independent study. We updated the numbers on that study back in 2012, and it doesn't take into all of our needs into consideration. But in 2010, when we were probably ballpark around 1,040 positions in 2010. The staffing study recommended an additional 268 positions. Now there's some variables to that depending on areas that you want to cover, but primarily back in 2010 the number was around 268 positions. In addition to that 1,040, so you're looking around 1,300 for this city right now. Overall, at some point, we should be around 1,300 officers.
Anything else you want to add?
No, it's just that I'll add that the council's added those positions. I mean, you don't have right now politically. You don't have a council that doesn't see the need. They know that we need more additional police officer positions. They have since 2012 when they started adding them, and they had a plan to add positions every year until the sales tax dropped. So we're a city that depends on sales tax, and when that sales tax drops and you don't have any other funding sources, which is not always the case in all cities across the country, then you're going to have limitations. I mean, you can only spend what you have. So the other side of that is other departments throughout this city have also had to cut. In fact, in most cases, other departments, some that we depend on, like legal personnel, some that the police department utilize, have also had to cut. In fact, they've cut a larger percentage than the police department has. So, because police is obviously public safety is a priority to the city and the council. So, there's a lot of considerations there, but I don't think it's one of those things where you don't have a council or management within the city that doesn't realize that we need more police officers. They do realize that, and it's how we're going to fund that. And this is a start. The sales tax that we're doing right now is a start, but there's also other funding needs in the city, and I think they have to take that into consideration. So if you're talking about a 1/4-cent sales tax, and you're talking about police and fire taking up that whole 1/4 cent, I can't say I would totally agree with that, because there's also some other needs. There needs to be some flexibility there. Yes, we do need more officers, and we'll get the lion's share of that sales tax, and I think we should, and it's needed. But again, there has to be some flexibility with that, and you've got the FOP's position, and you've got ours, and for the most part, we're on the same page. The FOP and management of this police department, and as far as needing more officers, we're on the same page, and how that maybe the difference is exactly how that happens.
Chief, does this funding, would it also include the equipment for the officers, or is that a whole separate?
Right now the funding in and of itself, the portion in adding the 68 officers and unfreezing the 48 would just be personnel costs. But that's where some flexibility needs to happen. If you have some flexibility in that sales tax, a completely dedicated fire and police sales tax, I'm not very supportive of it just being dedicated, because the city overall needs some additional funding. Now, I think they've committed to adding those positions with a portion of that sales tax, which I think is a huge commitment, and it's certainly a start. And it'd be something, if we added that number of officers, would probably take us about 3 years to add that number of additional officers anyway. And I know other funding sources are being looked at. Sales tax obviously should go up at some point within the community. Community's doing pretty well overall. Sales tax should go up. There's some other options that the state's looking at, some bills and some other ways to fund city government. So with that in mind, I'm pretty optimistic about being able to add more officers in the future, even beyond what this quarter-cent sales tax would do for police and fire and other things within the city. But that's not to say probably there could be other, if it was flexible enough, there could be some consideration for also taking care of equipment. Because there's never been, I've never heard anything from management or from anybody, from city management, city manager's office or any place else that says they're not going to find the funding, because we have to replace our equipment. We have to replace police cars, and that's the most expensive piece of equipment that we have. So there's always been a commitment to that, and it's usually been taken out of the use tax, from the MAP's use tax. So if that continues, that use tax will still be there, and there'll still be funding for equipment. But we have to find a way to fund equipment, and I think that commitment's there, and the city council knows that, and so does the city manager.
Can I just ask you about the numbers that FOP is advertising, basically saying there's like 608 assigned patrol officers to 4 divisions, and that was that was the number essentially back in '93. Is that accurate?
No, it's not. It's not completely accurate, and that's those are pretty. That fluctuates a lot, quite a bit. So I'd have to go back and look at that, but I know that the actual you can use different numbers at different times and come up with a different total. So if you're looking at authorized, we have more authorized than we had 15 or 20 years ago. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think we've been a little bit remiss over the last 15 or 20 years in trying to add officers incrementally to this department as the city's grown. I said that it's part of the staffing study. But at the same time, since 2012, there's been a commitment to try to make that up. And so a huge commitment. And I think that commitment's not going to go away. And if they're talking about adding the positions with the sales tax, that's a pretty huge commitment. It doesn't have to be dedicated for them to say this is what it's going to be. It's in writing. It's something they vote on. And it's kind of hard not to do that once you commit. So I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but I'm going to tell you right now that I think that's not completely correct. But I'd have to look at it and see. But I can tell you, depending on how they want to use numbers, we have more authorized than we've ever had, and we actually do have more officers on the street than we ever had. Now we've also had other responsibilities, other things that come up that draw resources to other areas of the department. So whether you have them on the street, whether you have them in investigations, does that on the street mean that includes a vice unit, which are also on the street? Does that include gang unit? Does that include a lot of things that we've added? You may take people off the street for the gang unit, but you're also putting them in a gang unit that's actually on the street that addresses a lot of different calls that patrol wouldn't have to do. So we've added civilian positions. We've added civilian positions that actually take calls that normally the officers would take and that are minor property calls. But we did not cut positions to do that. We added additional positions. So you can play with the numbers all you want and you can say what you want, but we have more officers now than we've ever had. So, and how we use those resources, it's going to change from year to year depending on what's required of us and what the needs are.